Lift every voice and sing till earth, heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies resound the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. March on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod to the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn has died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers died. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughter, out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where last white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, of our silent tears, thou who hast brought past our feet, straight from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk of the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand. True to our God, true to our God, true to our native land, true to our native land.
And welcome and good evening to a great celebration in the great memory and for the great legacy and honor of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I am Marcus Holmes, the facilitator of the Love and Stuff community. And thank you, Committed Sings. That was pre-recorded, but it was excellent. Give us some loves and likes in the comments wherever you are. And wherever you are, welcome. Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending if you're somewhere else around the world. I hope you will drop in the comments your location, and just drop in the comments when you hear the name Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., what thoughts come to your mind. We wanted to pause in the Love and Stuff community, a community that we love, to talk about the beloved community today, and to honor a great man, a drum major for justice, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so tonight we've gathered together some of the best of our Love and Stuff community members. All of our community members are great, but we wanted to just get some of the great orators and thinkers, some of the great singers, some of the great actresses and actors to join us. And I'm so honored and privileged that they are joining us and that you have joined us, whether you are on the Love and Stuff page or if you are joining us via Restream, on the LinkedIn Live, on Twitch TV or YouTube events. Just click share and tag someone in this great evening of celebration. They will be great that they have joined us, and you will be glad that you invited them. So click share right now. Take a moment to do that as I prepare to bring on our first speaker. I'm so excited to have all of them here and so thankful for their time this evening. Reverend Darren Williams is the Ministry Director of Bible Studies at Antioch Baptist Church of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he is no stranger to the Love and Stuff community. As a matter of fact, he is one of the voices that we love to elevate here. He is Detroit born and reared. He has a passion for his people and for the beloved community. Listen as he shares commentary and excerpts from the famous letter from the Birmingham jail, also known as the letter from Birmingham City Jail, and the Negro is your brother. It's an open letter that was written on April 16th, 1963 by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It says that people have a moral responsibility to break unjust laws and to take direct action rather than waiting potentially forever for justice to come through the courts. The letter, written in response to a call for unity during the 1963 Birmingham campaign, was widely published and became an important text for the American Civil Rights Movement. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our screen, Reverend Darren.
God bless you. Good evening. It's good to be here, especially for this occasion, to be able to celebrate the life, the legacy, the accomplishments, and the meaning of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His birthday actually was on the 15th, and on that day, a great and a true American was born who somehow mystically looked into the Constitution and saw himself in it. This letter that Marcus talks about, it's so much to it. 9 pages when I printed it off actually to start this presentation about it. And it is long for a letter. In fact, some of us probably have never seen a letter of this length in our lifetimes. and probably ever never will, since nobody writes letters anymore. However, it wasn't a letter in the sense of, just farewell, doing a welfare check, seeing how people were checking on people. This has actually been described as a manifesto. It's actually been described or compared to as the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson. But in its magnitude, it is one of the great pieces of literature in the United States lexicon of writing. It is literally cataloged among, like I mentioned, Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States, the Gettysburg Address by Abraham Lincoln. A couple of facts as we are coming to the letter, and I'm going to snatch a couple of excerpts out of it as we move along, just to highlight what its importance was in that day, but even more importantly, why it is significant for us today. This letter, as Ben said, is a response to an article that was penned by the clergy leaders, 8 of them, in the Birmingham city. Dr. King had been arrested and was in solitary confinement for 11 days for parading without a permit. That was the charge that they arrested him and locked him up for. 29 times he'd been arrested in his life. And this time, he was publicly lambasted by the religious leaders, white religious leaders, for what he had done. Very interestingly, he was in Montgomery, and he talks about this, in Birmingham, and he talks about this in the first part of the letter, because of the record that Alabama had in its injustice and oppression against African-American people. Of course, you'll remember the Montgomery bus boycott, Montgomery, Alabama, which started Dr. King's career, started in Alabama. You'll remember Bloody Sunday in Selma, when Representative John Lewis and many others were brutalized for their freedom ride, Selma, Alabama. And then 5 months later in September, right there in Birmingham, the 16th Street Baptist Church will be bombed by Ku Klux Klan members. And Birmingham was so violent, and it was interesting, it's not mentioned in this letter, that the civil rights leaders nicknamed Birmingham Bombingham, because more bombings of African-American people had occurred in that city and had been unsolved than any other city in the nation. Let me start where he starts with this letter. He's here in the jail, and he says, while confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely. He addresses it, my dear fellow clergymen. One comment I'd like to make right there is the contrast that to be drawn, where they call him an outside agitator in the letter. His response to them, his address to them, is my fellow clergymen. They question why he is there and the untimeliness of his being there. He responds, more basically, I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. And so in his work, which is his life's calling, they are questioning his presence there. And he is saying it is there because the very thing that his life has been given to is alive and well there in Birmingham. He does something then very interesting in this letter, which is considered by some, I mentioned before, as a manifesto, but he very detailed and succinctly lays out what the whole process and purpose of nonviolent direct action is. He says in nonviolent campaign, there are 4 very basic steps: collection of facts to determine whether injustices exist, negotiations, self-purification, and direct action. We have gone through all of these steps in Birmingham. I want to highlight that because I think it's very important, and even it's imperative for us to know that in the times of protest that we are living in right now, we need to take a very serious look at how they, during the civil rights movement and in the times of that movement, they didn't just take a reaction to whatever had happened and run out in the streets and start doing something and carrying signs and marching and things. No, but they went through a 4-step plan in order to ensure not only that what they were doing was justified, but that there would be some result, some positive and effective result that came from those things. Let me just make a couple of other notes about what he says here, and because again, with a 9-page letter, I won't be able to deal with it all. He deals with in this letter issues that we just saw cause this nation to erupt in the violent protests in Washington, D.C. What is that? He talks about voter fraud, voter suppression, and disenfranchisement, not cooked up and trumped up charges like we just saw, but the veritable facts of how African Americans have been disenfranchised in the voting process. And he points to it right there in Alabama. He talks about the justification of the struggle, about how he has to explain to his daughter how she just seen the commercial of Funtown on TV, and he has to explain to her that she can't go because it's closed to Negro children. He deals with the disappointment of the white church. And there he says that he thought of anybody who would understand the justice of their cause, that it would be the white church, at least the leaders of the white church. And I have to say here, sisters and brothers, because I'm about right at my time, I have to say here that the reality of the importance of this letter for our day, because almost point by point, everything that Dr. King was in Birmingham to address almost nearly still exists in the United States of America today. Not just cornered off in Birmingham, but across these United States. These same issues are there. And I believe for us that we still deal with white supremacy and racism in the way we do in this country, just like Dr. King says, because the white church has not stepped up and denounced these behaviors, practices, and attitudes as being antithetical to the kingdom of God. The white church has got to step up, because white supremacy is not created by African American people. Racism, anti-Black racism, is not created against by African American people. White people have done those things, and it's got to be the white church. White people have got to address that. Last thing, there are quotes, famous quotes of his that come from this letter. One of those: injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Freedom is never given up by the oppressor, but it must be demanded by the oppressed. Justice too long delayed is justice denied. This letter, again, very important. Another reason, because in colleges and universities today, government and history classes teach this letter. English and literature classes teach this letter because of how expertly penned it was. I urge you, I suggest to you all to take it and read it for yourself. It's a lengthy read, but I guarantee you it's worth every moment of the time that you'll put in reading it. And what you'll realize, that as great as an orator and speaker as Dr. King was, it's not just hype, because from his pen, that same kind of greatness exists. God bless you tonight. Let's celebrate the man who has done so much, in my estimation, single-handedly has done more than any other leader to garner civil rights, human rights for people. Amen. God bless you.
Bravo to Carolyn Tribune Brewer, who recorded that piece, and arranged that piece. Bravo to her. Give us some hearts and likes and thumbs up. Thank you so much for that. And Darren Williams, the Reverend Darren Williams, thank you for your commentary on the letter from the Birmingham jail. We're off to a great start and a magnanimous evening, and I am excited. Valencia Etner is the senior pastor and servant leader of Miles Chapel CME Church in Houston, Texas. And she is a seminal voice in the Love and Stuff community. Mama V, as she's affectionately known to us, comes from a generations of preachers and social activism. She is also a noted singer, writer, and actress, having starred in many roles throughout her career, including a portrayal of the Queen of Soul, the late Miss Aretha Franklin. Tonight, she portrays a great voice of the beloved community during the civil rights era, the incomparable Mahalia Jackson. If the legendary gospel vocalist Mahalia Jackson had been somewhere other than the National Mall in Washington, D.C. on August 28, 1963, her place in history would still have been assured purely on the basis of her musical legacy. But it is almost impossible to imagine that Miss Jackson would be anywhere else other than center stage at the historic March on Washington on that day in August of 1963, where she not only performed as the lead-in to Dr. King and his I Have a Dream speech, but she also played a direct role in the turning of that speech into one of the most memorable and meaningful in American history. Ladies and gentlemen, portraying the role of Mahalia Jackson, welcome Valencia Mama V Etner.
Y'all come on in. You know, I like people to come in and have a seat in my home. And while I know y'all want me to talk about Martin, I just want you to know who I am. Oh, I didn't say it, huh? Well, my name is Mahalia Jackson. They tell me that I'm the greatest gospel singer that ever lived. I don't know about all that. I just sing for the Lord. But my friends call me Haley. And since you all are talking about my good friend Martin today, I think that you can go on and call me Haley too. Well, before I tell you how Martin and I got so close, I got to tell you how I even came to be in the place where they found me. I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana. Y'all know New Orleans. I was born there, and that's why when people used to hear me talk, they say, "Where'd she get that from?" Well, I was born in New Orleans, and I was a young girl. I started singing when I was about 4 years old. I was singing in the churches, and people were listening to me sing, and they said, "Haley, you can't stay here. You got to go up north." Everybody was kind of going up north, but my mama kind of didn't want me to do that. But eventually, my aunties up in Chicago kind of got her to understand that I had a gift. And so when I was 15 years old, I went to Chicago, Illinois. I thought I was going to become a nurse, but I just had singing in my soul. And I kept singing for churches and singing for churches, sang for Salem and sang for other churches where people were coming in from all over and listening to Lil Haley sing. Well, I kept on singing. I got a lot of opportunities to sing. And in 1950, after I had traveled so many places, I got the opportunity of a lifetime, or so most folks who were in music would have thought. I got the opportunity to sing at Carnegie Hall, in New York, and I was just so excited to be able to sing at Carnegie Hall. But they didn't understand that I wasn't gonna sing anything but the Lord's music. I went to Monterey Jazz Festival, and guess what I sang? The Lord's music. Yeah, that's what I did. Well, in 1956, I think it was 56, 56. I got a phone call from Reverend Ralph Abernathy, and he said that Martin Luther King wanted me to come sing at a rally. I said, Martin Luther King wants me. Now, I've been at Carnegie Hall, but what mattered to me was that Martin Luther King wanted me to be a part of the movement. I grew up with all of that racism in New Orleans, and I was with them in the fight. Excuse me, I get excited when I think about that sometimes. It used to make me so mad. But I knew that what I had to offer the movement was my voice. So they have me come to rallies and revivals, and I would go there, and sometimes they would need more money in the offering, and they'd say, if you give a little more, Mahalia Jackson's gonna come and sing another song. Well, that would help them to raise some money, and I didn't ask for nothing, because for the movement, that was the way I was supporting the movement. Well, I remember one day they came to Chicago with a revival. We were at a Church of God in Christ Church, because you know the Baptists, they didn't really embrace Martin. Never understood that. But we were at a Church in God in Christ Church, and I was up there to sing. I had already kind of sang a little bit, and Martin, it was time for Martin to get up. And I had a song I sang for Martin, because people always wanted to call Martin Moses, but that was Harriet. Harriet was Moses, but Martin. I said, Martin, he's a young man. Martin is Joshua. So when he got ready to get up, I just reared back and said, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. I finished that note. The crowd was wild, and they was ready for Martin. Martin sure did preach that night. I remember Martin said, well, Mahalia, we getting ready to go to Washington, D.C. Now, I'd been with him in Birmingham, and I'd been with him in Detroit. And then they said we were going to the National Mall, that national place that outside the Lincoln Memorial, and we were going to have a rally. Called it the March on Washington. They wanted me to sing. I was excited, wanted to be there so that I could be a part of that history. Well, I'm going to let you in on a secret. I think that young man almost told you my whole story right here, but I'm going to tell you this part. I want you to come closer. Come closer. Let me tell you. Martin was preaching that sermon on Washington, on that stairs. And Martin got to the point where he was about to end that speech. He always had a little something he would show. I think they call it analogy that he would use at the end of a speech. And on this day, he was using this insufficient funds check that America had written to us. And that was going to be his ending. But I didn't like the way the crowd was acting. They wasn't up enough. So I started calling to him. Tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell them about the dream. Some other folks started joining. Yeah, tell them about the dream, Martin, because he had preached that in Detroit. And then when he got to Washington and they weren't acting about it, I said, oh, but if you tell them about that dream, they'll never forget this day. Martin started telling them about the dream, and the rest, as they say, is history. Well, we kept on going and doing rallies, and after that, I have a dream speech. I knew Martin was going to be in trouble. Then we started going places, and I was getting a little sickly, and I had been having some trouble with my health, and so I couldn't go like I used to, but I kept hearing what Martin was doing. And Martin said, look, Haley, if I go before you, I want you to sing that Precious Lord for me. There got to be the Memphis rally, and I couldn't go because I was sick. Martin really preached that night, and I heard he talked about that he wasn't going to live a long time. And that very next day, before the newspapers could get the report, I got a phone call that my friend was dead. They told me, Hallie, I don't know what you're going to do because you can't travel. I said, oh, I'm traveling. I promised Martin that I would sing that song for him. So sick as I was, I got up on that podium and got to that mic. I just began to moan like I knew I had to. And I said, precious Lord, take my hand and lead me on. Let me stay. I'm tired. I'm weak. I'm worn. I kept singing about through the storm and through the night. And I was so emotional. But I knew what my friend wanted. He wanted me to sing that song. So I sang it. A few years later, I wouldn't be here. But for that time, I did what my friend wanted. Y'all remember Martin. Don't you ever forget him. Martin was the Joshua. He kept fitting that battle. He gave us the baton. You better go so the walls can come tumbling down. Thank y'all. I'll see you later. I'm going in this kitchen and see what I can fix up. I'll see you later. Bye. See you later.
Thank you, Valencia Etner, for that beautiful portrayal. Come on, give her some love, some hearts, some handshakes, some high fives, whatever emoji you can pull up that would summarize your feelings about that great job. I am so excited that we are moving forward and another one of our orators who is a brilliant mind. She's a voice I love to elevate in Love and Stuff because she is a constitutional law aficionado, I tell you. And she's a brilliant mind. And when we talk about organizing and getting the beloved community rallied around what the law really says, this is one of the people that I look to help us. And you'll be hearing more of her voice in the Love and Stuff community. She's a member of our community and she has dedicated her life to public service. Currently, she serves as the Deputy Director of the Labor Relations Division for the City of Detroit, navigating and pivoting through all kinds of contract negotiations with police and fire and every other union among 46 others. I can't name all 46, but she is a gem and a jewel, both to our community and to our world. Help me welcome Valerie Colbert-Osunwadi. And listen now as Valerie shares insights about the great works of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Good evening, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King. For many of us, he remains frozen on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, delivering the words of the I Have a Dream speech. And as I began reading the writings and the speeches of Dr. Martin Luther King and actually looking at footage of film footage and also looking at documentaries, just trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about, it struck me how extraordinary Dr. Martin Luther King was. And I don't use that word to discount that Dr. King was a man with failures and strongholds that he needed God's power and grace to overcome. God tells us that we have all sinned and come short of the glory of God. I use extraordinary in the true meaning of the word as remarkable, very unusual, rare. But I also use it as extraordinary in the spiritual sense, because there is no doubt that Dr. King was appointed and anointed for his time. Dr. King led the civil rights movement at age 25, and it ended his untimely death at 39. He never let youth be an excuse for any failure as it related to serving his people. As a matter of fact, I'm always reminded when I think of him of the scripture that says, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for believers in speech and conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. This is what Paul told Timothy, the young Timothy, when he was a disciple and new into the ministry. I can only imagine the weight that was on a 25-year-old at that time. But at that time, Dr. King utilized his speech, utilized his youth for its power, its strength, but he never used it as an excuse to not perform. He also had this magnificent and divine anointed gift to speak and to lead and to persevere and to inspire. It reminds me again of the scripture that says you're to stir up the gift. Dr. King himself said that when he was ordained and when the ministers, his fathers and other ministers, laid hands on him, he said it was like fire shut up in his bones. That was a legacy that lived throughout all of Dr. King's speeches, all of Dr. King's interviews, his writings. You could tell that the anointing of the Holy Spirit was on this man. And it had to be to do such extraordinary and arduous work for the Black community, for America, actually. I went to look at a speech called The Other America. And before I talk a little bit about this speech, I want to talk about the backdrop of what was happening, because he gave this speech in 1967. The Civil Rights Act had already passed in 1964. The Voting Rights Act had already passed in 1965. And of course, Dr. King had already inspired millions through his I Have a Dream speech. And of course, because of that, today he remains one of our most vivid symbols of hope for racial unity in this country. However, in 1967, Dr. King was actually lamenting about what had become of this dream. He talked about in a speech that life was made up of a series of shattered dreams that we all had to deal with. And he actually talked about how his dream had become a nightmare in America, particularly in 1967. We all know that riots were happening. There was racial discord across the country, and Dr. King had to live with that. King's message became more challenging and more pessimistic as he went through the last year of his life. The Vietnam War was raging, and King denounced it, and his denouncement came at a great cost from mainstream America and even among other civil rights leaders. And at this time, the anti-war movement was just beginning. We still had people, the majority of American society still was supporting the Vietnam War. And of course, Martin Luther King was relentlessly being a subject of surveillance through wiretapping and room bugging and informants. I learned that the longtime photographer for the SCLC was actually an FBI informant for 18 years. And yet, despite all of that surveillance, they never warned him of credible death threats to him. But Dr. King continued to follow his moral compass, which left him increasingly isolated at this time by the public and other civil rights leaders. Martin Luther King's deep conviction about nonviolence and the need to help poor people led him to say many things that Americans felt were threatening. Again, King denounced the Vietnam War, and he was told that it was politically unwise, and he was also told that, not only told, but the budget and the donations to the SCLC, they dwindled because of him making those remarks. And a cost was also that he had a rift with the President of the United States, LBJ at the time. But in true Martin Luther King fashion, he went on to say that speaking against the Vietnam War, that being morally wise may mean being politically unwise. And he said, ultimately, a genuine leader is not an aid for consensus, but a mode for consensus. And on some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? The conscience asks the question, is it right? And here comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because the conscience tells him it is right. On April 14, 1967, Dr. King gave a speech at Stanford University, and it was entitled The Other America. And he talked about how there are literally two Americas. One America is beautiful for flowing with prosperity and honey and opportunity. And then there was tragically the other America where daily there's the ugliness about it that constantly transforms the buoyancy of hope into the fatigue of despair. And he said, in this America, millions of work-starved men walk the streets daily in search for jobs that do not exist. In this America, millions find themselves living in rat-infested, vermin-filled slums. In this America, people are poor by the millions. They find themselves perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. These are breathtaking words as we look around us at our society today, where the chasm between the super rich and the poor is wider and deeper than ever. We look at the inequities that COVID has showed us. We look at Black unemployment, that it's double that of white unemployment. We look at our foreclosure crisis in America today. We look at the disparity in Black and white residential segregation remains. And most glaringly, we look at the disparity in our criminal justice system. And we still see that there are two Americas in this country. Dr. King in his speech told his audience that the struggle for civil rights and the struggle to make these two Americas one America is much more difficult today than it was 5 or 10 years ago. That even stands true today. He went on to say that in a sense, that was a struggle for decency. We could not go to a lunch counter in so many instances and get a hamburger or a cup of coffee. We could not make use of public accommodations. These were humiliating conditions that people could identify with and wanted to rectify and change. But he said, what is different in the terms of what he was looking for, King was looking for full and genuine equality. He was looking for justice in America. He was looking at the increasing, he was looking that increasingly poverty was an impediment to human equality and decency. He went on to say that we must see that the struggle is much more difficult. It's much more difficult today because we are struggling for genuine equality. And it is much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee a livable income, a good solid job. It's easier to integrate a public park than it is to make genuine quality integrated education a reality. King saw that the campaign against poverty and the fight for full economic justice would be a greater sacrifice for white America, because now the strategy was not to integrate a lunch counter, but we were struggling for the money to buy a hamburger at that lunch counter. In an interview, Dr. King said it didn't cost this nation 1 penny to integrate a lunch counter or 1 penny to guarantee the right to vote. The nation will have to spend billions of dollars to solve problems of poverty and housing. And King believed that there had to be a radical redistribution of economic and political power in this country. Sound familiar? We see this today in our progressive movement, with our Democrats, when Bernie Sanders was out on the campaign trail, when Elizabeth Warren was out on the campaign trail. Everyone advocating for better redistribution of America's wealth. Same was holding true in 1967. In this speech, Dr. King wanted to continue to highlight that racism in America was still alive and well. He went on to say that in this speech that racism is still alive in American society and much more widespread than we realize. In these past 4 years, how many people's eyes have been opened to the persistent and consistent ugliness of racism? We have all seen that this evilness has been let out of the cage, fostered and defended by our own president of the United States. We saw that 2 weeks ago when we had insurrection on our Capitol. Dr. King wanted to make sure that people knew that racism was based on the myth of a superior, that there was a superior and an inferior race. And he went on to say that I say that however unpleasant it is, we must honestly see and admit that racism is still deeply rooted all over America, and it is still deeply rooted in the North, and is still deeply rooted in the South. Again, these words were spoken in 1967, and in 2021, America is still wrestling with, confronting, and admitting to the deep roots of racism in our societal institutions. There's so much that I want to say, and I'm going to skip a little bit. And he went on to talk about how there were so many myths surrounded by the need for radical change. He went on to talk about how one of the main myths was that legislation could not end. He said, ending racism and human inequality can only be achieved by changing the heart. That was the fallacy. But he went on to say, yes, he believed in changing hearts. He believed that because he was a preacher. He believed in the regeneration of the soul. But he went on to say that morality can be legislated, but behavior, while morality cannot be legislated, behavior can be regulated by the law. And that regulation can change the heart. He went on to say it may not can change the heart, but it can restrain the harvest. Even though it may be true that the law cannot make a man love me, it can restrain him from lynching me. And while the law may not change the hearts of men, it can, and it does change the habits of men. And when you begin to change the habits of men, pretty soon the attitudes will be changed, and pretty soon hearts will be changed. I urge you to look at this letter this speech because it is profound. It too has some of the greatest quotes of Dr. Martin Luther King. This was a man who at this time was tired. He wanted to take a sabbatical. He said he was tired of marching for rights that he should have had when he was born. But he continued to uplift us with hope. And one of the things that he said again was, he went on to say, because both the sacred heritage of our nation and the will of the Almighty God are embodied in our echoing demands. And so I can still sing, we shall overcome. We shall overcome because somehow the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. At the end of everything that I was reading, and there's so much more that I could say, Dr. King believed that the right to protest was at peril. We see that today. There were crackdowns across the country regarding protests, peaceful protests. Dr. King was changing his way of thinking and his approach. He was moving towards global human rights rather than citizenship rights. He was planning the Poor People's Campaign, a multiracial army that would come to Washington, build an encampment, demand from Congress an economic bill of rights for all Americans, Black, white, or brown. He had long known that the fight for racial equality could not be separated from the need for economic equity, fairness for all, including working poor and the poor. Dr. King is often seen as not being radical. Nothing could be farther from the truth when you read Dr. King's speeches, particularly at the end of his life. He was just as radical as Stokely Carmichael and Malcolm X in his regard that we needed to be seeking global human rights. The divergence between these people was only because he believed it could be achieved through nonviolence. And Dr. King believed that it would be foolhardy for any Black person to try to achieve freedom in America through violence. He saw nonviolence as the power force that when mobilized, nonviolence did not have to give way to violence. He saw this as a way of changing and a great tool for the oppressed. Martin Luther King, at the time when he gave the speech and at the time when life was ending, was beginning to challenge not just racism and inequality, but also the war, the military industrial complex, capitalism as in how wealth is distributed, imperialism. These are still our problems today, and in many ways, we are even worse off now. But we hold hope in Dr. King's speech. We hold hope in his speech, and he ended that speech in saying, "In the word, sure to speak symbolically, that we will be the day, or there will be a day, when the morning stars will sing together, and the sons of God will shout for joy." Thank you.
He's got the whole world in his hands. Whole world, got the world hands. He's got the whole world. Ooh, got it in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. Keep holding me.
Outstanding. Valerie Colbert Asomwadi, give her a round of applause. And we know that's hearts and emojis shooting throughout the screen. What an informed sharing of thoughts across Dr. King. And I agree with her. He was radical. We often hear people say he wasn't radical, but as she highlighted for us, there are many aspects of his writings that reveal to us his heart and mind concerning the need for our world to change. And so thank you for that, Valerie Colbert Osomwadi. I may have mispronounced that again. And Carolyn Tribune Brewer, thank you for that. He's got the whole world in his hands. Beautiful, beautiful. And so now we're going to another person in our Love and Stuff community. Aria Moody is an actor, singer, voice actor, public speaker, writer, former dance and choreographer, trainer, and educator. She does it all. Aria has spent the majority of her acting career on Michigan stages for such productions as Single is the New Black, Hairspray, Rent, A Raisin in the Sun, and Colors Dream of the Master. Now taking on more roles in independent films, she has portrayed characters ranging from police officers and detectives, psychologists and other doctors, to mothers and girlfriends, and projects covering multiple genres, ranging from comedy to suspense. Her latest appearances include Mrs. Patton in the hilarious Not Left in Vegas, and Aunt Rhonda in the suspenseful Cain and Abel. Tonight, Aria brings to us a portrayal of Reese Taylor, born December 31st, 1919, and departed this life December 28th, 2017. She was an African-American woman in Henry County, Alabama. Born and raised in sharecropping in the Jim Crow era in the South, she refused to remain silent about a brutal rape that she suffered, perpetrated by white men, which led to organizing in the African-American community on behalf of justice and civil rights. On September 3rd, 1944, she was kidnapped while leaving church and gang raped by 6 white men. Despite those men's confessions to authority, 2 grand juries subsequently declined to indict the men. No charges were ever brought against her assailants. It was the Committee for Equal Justice for Mrs. Reese Taylor, a Black women's organization formed to stop white men from raping Black women, that trained other activists such as Rosa Parks. As a preacher at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama during the 50s, Dr. King took a bold and forthright position in favor of contraception, a stance that was far from common among Southern preachers in the day. In 2011, the Alabama legislature officially apologized to Mrs. Taylor on behalf of the state for, quote, its failure to prosecute her attackers, unquote. Taylor's rape, refusal to remain silent, and the subsequent court cases were among the early instances of nationwide protest and activism among the African-American community, and ended up providing an organizational spark in the civil rights movement. Ladies and gentlemen, the portrayal of Reese Taylor by actress Aria Moody.
My name, hush, hush, somebody's calling my name, oh my Lord, oh my Lord. Oh, well, hey there. Yes, my name is Reese Taylor, Mrs. Reese Taylor. I was born right here in Abbeville, Alabama. Been here all my life. Yes, I was a sharecropper when I married Mr. Willie Guy Taylor. My mother died when I was 17, so I kept my word to her, and I helped my daddy to take care of my younger siblings. Yeah, one thing about Robert Corbett, everybody knew. He loved his family, and he kept a shotgun. I sure do wish he could have been sleeping in the tree with that shotgun the night I came home from revival. It's September the 3rd, 1944. I ain't gonna never forget it. It was me and Miss Fanny and her son Wes walking home, and he carried a big old stick because we won't get bit by no foxes in the night. It's pretty peaceful. Coming from revival, we had such a high time in the Lord. It was wonderful. We were singing and dancing and shouting everywhere. Oh, Lord, and did we pray. Ooh, and Pastor brought such a good, strong word. Thought everything was going to be great. There was trouble brewing I couldn't even imagine. See, my brother said these boys had been circling around the church since about 8 o'clock. Now, everybody know what time church get out. Now I saw them go past and saw them come back, and I didn't think nothing of it at first. And they stopped behind us. And it was 7 white boys. Now, Miss Fanny said, look, don't y'all run. Don't y'all say nothing. Maybe if we just do what they say, they leave us alone. Well, child, by then it was too late. My feet was already running. I might have made it too. Except right there at the edge of the woods was this great big old fence. Couldn't get around it. Couldn't get over it. I had no choice. I had to turn around and go back. They was waiting on me too. Miss Fanny and Wes was standing stock still. Wes had thrown that stick away. You know, he knew he wasn't no match for no 7 men. He was just trying not to make it no worse. When I got back there, it was Hugo Wilson and them. And they pulled their gun and they said, get in the car. And I begged him. I said, please, sir, just let me go home to my baby. She only 9 months old, and her daddy not that good with her by herself. He just let me go to church and told me come right back. Please, can I just go home to my baby? They laughed at me. Said, nigga, get in the car. Lord, if you could have seen the fear in Miss Fanny's eyes and the anger boiling over in little young Wes. They felt as helpless as I was. And you knew it. Once I got in the car, they put a blindfold on me. And I said it again. Please, if you just let me go home, I won't say nothing to nobody. I promise you, I just want to see my baby. But they just kept driving. And the car finally stopped. I said, well, maybe they're just gonna leave me in the woods. Maybe it's just a cruel joke. They're just gonna make me walk home. No. The kind of cruelty they had in mind, I couldn't have even imagined. They snatched me out that car and they walked me into a field. They put the gun on me again and they said, take off all your clothes. You lay down here just like you was with your husband. I knew then what they was about to do. First it was Herbert Levitt. He was 18. Dillard York, he's 17. Hugo Wilson, the driver, he wasn't but 16. And Luther Lee, he's 17 too. And that Joe Culpepper, he's 15. Robert Campbell, he was 17. And I guess Billy Howerton must have been standing guard or something. He was only 14. I kept trying to fight them off. I kept trying to get away, but 7 didn't want me. Wasn't nothing I could do. I kept begging him, please just don't kill me. I promise I won't say nothing. Just please don't kill me. And I tell you, the Lord must have been with me that night for sure. They didn't kill me. They could have. all the things they did to my body. I never had kids again. I guess they finally got tired of me. So they told me, put my clothes on and get yourself in the car. The blindfold back on me and started to drive. And they stopped the car and threw me out. I snatched off that blindfold and I realized I was right there on the edge of town. Oh, it had to be God, because I mustered all the strength I could and I started to run. My husband and my daddy must have been looking for me because I saw my daddy up the road calling for me. I ran into his arms and he held me up like he always did. Soon after, Willie Guy came and the sheriff right behind him. I told him, man, I wasn't going to say nothing. But as soon as I saw Sheriff Lockett, I told him everything. Everything! He went right away and got Hugo Wilson, brought him back. He said, now, Reese, is this here one of the boys you said did this thing to you? I said, yes, sir, sir. Yes, sir, that's him. That's one of them right there. He said, you lying whore. Can you believe that? He said that I wasn't no better than a prostitute. That they had paid me to do the terrible things they done to me. He said he didn't even know me before that night. Now that was a lie. I walked past his house almost every day. But Sheriff took him on back. My dad and my husband took me on home. If I buy my house that night, so me and my husband and my baby had to move home with my daddy. And Daddy started sleeping in the trees with his shotgun again. That man sure was gonna protect his family no matter what. Now Billy Houghton, he only lived across the road from Daddy and him. He kept his distance. He wouldn't say not a mumbling word. We finally thought we might be getting a little piece of justice because they said we had to go to the grand jury. Then white men turned me right back around, said they wasn't going to try nobody for what I had to say. Lord, you should have seen black folk. They was in a uproar. They were so mad because we had witnesses, everything. They said no, enough to charge them with. One of their attorneys, he even talked to my husband and said, hey, nigga, how about $600? Ain't that enough for raping your wife? Let's just forget this whole thing happened. $600 for my dignity. $600 for my life being changed forever. They really thought they could put a price on it. Didn't matter to know. Because NAACP and everybody else got wind of what happened to me. And they sent Miss Rosa Parks to come investigate. Yes, sir, I tell you. She came right on into town like she owned the place. She come right to see me. She said she was so sorry for all the terrible things that done happened to me. And she was here to try to help me get some justice. Well, old Sheriff Lockett didn't like that, not at all. I tell you, he come running up in my house and he said to her, "You got to go. We don't allow no strangers like you in this town, stirring up trouble." Because you know, old Southern secrets is supposed to always stay secret. She left, she listened. But she wasn't afraid of him at all. No, sir. She came right back. And this time she asked me even more questions. She asked even more people. Oh, and Sheriff didn't like that at all. He threw her right out of my house and off my porch. She fell right on her knees in front of everybody. But I tell you something powerful about a woman who ain't afraid to fall to her knees. Now, we got another turn in front of this here grand jury. They said the exact same thing. They just didn't believe nothing I had to say. Since them boys had said I was a prostitute and all. It was a long, hard road. But finally, one day, at least, the state of Alabama gave me an apology. They made a big to-do about it. It was all over the news. That wasn't much. But if you know how Alabama was back in them days, you know that was still a victory. Yeah. I never did get to see all that justice they thought we was gonna get. On December 28, 2017, I closed my eyes for the last time. But just like God was with me then, I get to be with him now. I'm so glad trouble don't last always. Oh, I'm so glad trouble don't last always. I'm so glad trouble don't last always. Oh my Lord, what shall I do?
If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody that he's traveling wrong, then my living, it shall not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a Christian ought, if I can bring back beauty to a world abroad, if I can spread love's message, that the master taught, then my living, it shall not be in vain. then my living shall not be in vain. Oh, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living, it shall not be in vain. No, my living shall not be in vain. Oh, no, my living, it shall not be in vain. If I can show somebody, and if I can help them as I sing this song, then my living, it shall not. No, my living, it shall not. No, my living, it shall not be in vain. Oh, no, it won't be in vain.
We thought we'd put a slight commercial in there from one of our Love and Stuff community business owners. If you want hardwood flooring, you need to reach out to Ernest Sisson Jr., who's in our Love and Stuff community, who does remarkable work. And we want to thank him for being one of, in part, our sponsors and joining us, one of our partners for this event tonight. Thank you, Ursula Merritt Bird, psalmist, who did an excellent job with If I Can Help Somebody as I Pass Along. And thank you so much, actress Aria Moody, for your portrayal of Reese Taylor. I think we all learned something about that gripping story, and I hope that you will read more and learn more about Reese Taylor and the work that Rosa Parks did to help her as part of the beloved community. We're moving forward to another member of our Love and Stuff community, almost to our end. I hope that you are enjoying and having a great time with us. Actor, model, serialpreneur Richard Dickey Mason is the brand ambassador for the Love and Stuff community. So he is the guy you see modeling all of our merchandise, and we are absolutely privileged and proud to have him as our brand ambassador. With countless webisodes, television appearances, commercials, films, and theater roles under his belt, Richard is always willing to share his great gifts and graces. Tonight, he shares on a noted member of the beloved community who recently passed away, the late Congressman John Lewis. Congressman Lewis was one of the Big Six leaders of groups who organized the 1963 March on Washington. He fulfilled many key roles in the civil rights movement and its actions to end legalized racial segregation in the United States. In 1965, he led the first of 3 Selma to Montgomery marches across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. In an incident which became known as Bloody Sunday, state troopers and police attacked the marchers, including Lewis. Ladies and gentlemen, the portrayal and information on the late Congressman John Lewis, who marched alongside Dr. King and was one of his proteges, actor Richard Dickey Mason.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. Just want to share a little bit about John Lewis. John Robert Lewis dedicated his whole entire life onto just serving and fighting for the rights of people of color. John Lewis was born February 21st, 1940, and unfortunately he passed July 17th, 2020 at the age of 80. This is a man who accounts for it being arrested for almost 40 times, or somewhere roughly around 40 times, just standing up for the rights of Black people. And he started really, really young, at the early age of 20 years old. 1959 to 1960, he organizes the student sit-in and demonstrations in the Nashville area. May 1961, he volunteers as a freedom rider, challenging bus and rail segregation laws. In 1963 to 1966, he was the chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. March 7, 1965 is what we all know. And he helped organize the Voting Rights March from Selma to Montgomery, and was amongst the 600 demonstrators attacked by police. And that's the day we call Bloody Sunday. They fractured his skull. He was one of the people that was arrested. They beat him, fractured his skull, but that didn't stop him, because on March 21st to March 25th in 1965, he joined 3,000 demonstrators marching from Selma to Montgomery. And in the time under protection of the federal troops, the size of the group was about 25,000 by the time they reached Montgomery. So even with a fractured skull, he still stood and fought for the rights of our people. In 1966, he co-founded the Southern Coordinating Committee to end the war in Vietnam. In 1966 and 1977, he was associate director of the Field Foundation. Then from 1967 to 1970, he was a community organizer director for the Southern Regional Council. And then he moved into, what he did was, it's so cool when you look at his story, because when he didn't just take a break. He went from one thing immediately into the next thing, just trying to find new ways to be able to serve our people. From 1970 to 1977, he was the director of the Voter Education Project. From 1977 to 1980, he was the associate director of Action, a federal volunteer agency appointed by the President Jimmy Carter. From 1982 to 1986, he joined the Atlanta City Council. And then from 1987 to 2020, he served at the House of U.S. Representatives for Georgia's 5th District. Back in March 7, 2004, John Lewis Monument is unveiled in Selma, Alabama, at the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge to commemorate the events of Bloody Sunday. So one of the good things was that he was able to actually see his monument raised up while he was still alive. Sometimes we wait until after our leaders have passed on to finally commemorate them or to give them our flowers. But he was able to live and see his monument raised up. At the age of 69, just to show you how much he never stopped fighting, April 27, 2009, at the age of 69, he was arrested outside of the embassy of Sudan, where he was protesting the obstruction of the aid of the refugees in Darfur. February 15, 2011, Barack Obama awarded Lewis the President Medal of Freedom. So now we go up to that, at the age of 76, on June 22nd, 2016, Lewis leads the sit-in on the White House floor to protest inaction on gun control and try to push a vote preventing people on the terrorist watch list from buying guns. The demonstration draws 170 lawmakers. After about 25 hours, Democrats decide to end the sit-in, but vow to continue when Congress returns for the next session. So all the way up until he was not able to anymore, because he ended up being diagnosed with cancer, all the way up until that time that he just physically couldn't do it anymore, he continued to fight for the rights of our people. He stood next to Martin Luther King and continued out through his whole life to leave a legacy on behalf of us. And he was the first lawmaker to be laid in state, African American. So one of his favorite poems was this, and I want to read this poem, was Invictus. It says, "Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I think whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstances, I have not winced nor cried out loud. Under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Thank you.
And thank you, Richard Dickey Mason, for sharing that information on the late Congressman John Lewis and that beautiful poem. And as we come close to the end, another brilliant legal mind who may be most notably known for her work on the famous Malice Green case here in Detroit, Michigan. Brenda Braceful is a savvy litigator who has mentored many attorneys and provided leadership to the City of Detroit's law department before her retirement. She continues to serve through her work with Autism Walks and also serves as a civil service commissioner with the City of Detroit. Listen as Brenda shares some of her thoughts regarding Dr. King, which may include some insights into his works, Chaos or Community. Ladies and gentlemen, Brenda Braceful.
Thank you. And I want to extend my gratitude for Marcus Holmes for including me in such a distinguished group of presenters, performers, and participants, and also for just hosting Love and Stuff and seeking to educate, uplift, and inspire us. When I was asked to talk about Martin Luther King, the thing that really struck me was he was such an embodiment of the power of words. And there's a long history of words that just touch our very soul and hopefully help to drive the nation in the right direction. When you hear 70 years ago, that's all you need to hear to realize you're going to hear the Gettysburg Address. As an earlier speaker said, when you have, I have a dream, you know that you are going to be uplifted and your moral compass charged. But this is not new. The Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, you can tell when words are truly inspired because they stand the test of time and still hold true to us today. So I decided to pick 4 quotes from Dr. King and hopefully apply them to our current situation. We can look at the March on Washington and compare it to the insurgent rush at the Capitol. Both were groups of people who traveled to our nation's capital, but look at the difference in the way they impacted our society. Which brings me to my first quote. We need leaders not in love with money, but justice. Not in love with publicity, but humanity. It is gratifying that Georgia sought to send 2 senators to represent Georgia and help this country who were truly not in love with money, but justice. Not in love with publicity, but humanity, because we need people in leadership positions who are going to help bend that arc of justice. One of my other favorite quotes comes when he was writing at the Morehouse College student newspaper. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of a true education. You know, we bemoan the fact that our poor children are no longer being able to benefit from in-person learning and they're having to look at virtual. But I charge all of our young parents and grandparents, because some grandparents are certainly responsible, we can use this as an opportunity to provide our children with an education more than just what's in books, reading, writing, arithmetic, but to help them develop character. Sometimes when I text with my grandsons, and they've taught me how to text, I'm still not technically savvy, and I appreciate Marcus for walking me through this. Sometimes I just send them a quote from Octavia Butler or Martin Luther King, to remind them that think on principles. Great people don't talk about other people. They talk about ideas and principles. So let your words really reflect the character of your heart. Another quote that I hold close, which he wrote in Stride Toward Freedom in 1958, true peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. And again, we can see that that resonates with us in today's political climate. After the death of George Floyd, there were peaceful demonstrations, not only here in America, but all over the globe. People felt the hurt that that man felt as someone kneeled on his neck for over 8 minutes, calling him to cry out to his dead mother, and realize that even if we're not upset about this, we cannot have peace as long as we don't have justice. We can talk about the stock market, the economy, but if it's not touching all of the population, then Dr. King realized that true peace is not merely the absence of tension, the fact that people aren't upset about it, it has to be the presence of justice. We cannot have two Americas. We cannot have unequal treatment. He recognized that we needed to have equal opportunity for all men. And I know that so many of his quotes are well known to us, which again speaks to the power of his anointing and his intellect, that here we are decades later, and these things still resonate and give us a pathway to a better life. And this is one that my father used to use with us when sometimes we complained about the menial tasks that we were given. Now, we weren't old enough to have jobs and to contribute to the family coffers, but somehow we felt that we should have a say in how those monies were spent. And taking out the trash and washing the dishes and mopping the floor just seemed beneath us. And he would always remind us, be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be a sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or fail. Be the best of whatever you are. And this was a speech that Dr. King gave to a group of students at a junior high school in Philadelphia on October 26, 1967. And again, that resonates with us today. We may not all be presidents like the incomparable Barack Obama, but if you're on city council, then be true to the constituents that you serve. You may not be a highway, but if you're nothing more than the patriarch or the matriarch of your family, be a light to lead them to being the best that they can be. It may not be you that achieves it. It may be the next generation. I may not be the person that passes the legislation to end police brutality, but it may be my grandson, my granddaughter, my grandniece. If I can show them the way, that strive to be the best that you can be. And that is the wonderful message of Dr. King, that many want to dismiss him just as, well, he was a wonderful orator. But if you listen to the substance of the words that he left us with in the brief 39 years that he was blessed to walk on the time side of life, you recognize that this was a man who was the moral compass. He was not concerned with just being famous or infamous. He was concerned with being on the right side of justice. And it was not always politically expedient, certainly was not always personally safe, but he was true to his ideals. And that is a message that we need to thoroughly embrace today. As we face the inauguration of a new administration, including the first woman of color to serve as a vice president, it's easy for us to believe that we have overcome. But we have to recognize that while that is a wonderful, wonderful achievement, and I am so thankful that a new generation of young ladies of color will see that this too can be your fate. We must not lose sight of the fact that on the same month that we are preparing for the inauguration, we had insurgents overrun the Capitol. There's been so much talk about the danger that immigrants face coming to this country. We still celebrate the unfortunate airplane uses missiles for 9/11, but there has not been sufficient conversation, no intelligent conversation about the danger that lies within. And when you look at the fall of great civilizations over the years, often it's like a cancer. It starts within. They're not always overthrown from the outside. So we need to have an honest conversation that making America great again, we have to first acknowledge that there are many flaws and things that we have to address before we can move this country forward. And Dr. King has left us a blueprint and a map. If we remain true to the ideals that he espoused, and again, if you look at his life, toward the end of his life, he was organizing the Poor People's March on Washington because he realized that it was not just an issue of racism, although racism, as we see, is alive and well, but income inequality. The failure of people to be able to maintain a decent standard of living, though they're working 40 hours a week. And we still face some of those same hurdles today. PBS did a documentary on the Triangle Shirt Factory. And many people don't appreciate that the unfortunate treatment of immigrant sewers, where they were trapped in a building and died because of the lack of safety, equipment, exits to leave the building, because people were more concerned with trying to place more people in the building to create more goods, helped to mobilize the unionization movement in America. When people come together, they can effect change. And so we should never, ever diminish the power of the collective will of the people. And in closing, Dr. King was, in my humble estimation, one of the greatest Americans, because this man dedicated his life not to achieving material success or celebrityship, but to try and better the lives of not only his personal family, but his entire community and his entire nation, in fact, the entire world. And so we have to appreciate that his charge was to America: be true to what you said on paper. If all men are created equal and entitled to the pursuit of happiness, then we need to have legislation, policies, and directives that afford that opportunity to everyone in equal measure. Don't ask me to pull myself up by my bootstraps when you refuse to give me a pair of boots. So it is just an honor to be able to reflect on the many ways Dr. King has touched the soul of this nation, and hope that this is a lesson that we never forget. And again, my thanks to Marcus for having the foresight to memorialize and appreciate Dr. King in such a meaningful way. And I'm humbled that I was asked to be a participant. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much, Brenda Bracewell. Fantastic. And I really appreciate all of our presenters have done an outstanding job. You know, on January 6th, 2000, I almost said 2020, because it doesn't feel like it's a new year with all of the events that we've experienced. It feels like December 50th. But on January 6th, 2021, I woke up and I was excited. I was excited because I believed that the Right Reverend Raphael Warnock, who I've had the pleasure and privilege to meet during the work of the Progressive National Baptist Convention, which is the conventional home of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Warnock chaired the Social Justice Committee. He is an intelligent guy and personable guy, an humble guy, and kind of a funny guy. So it was great to see the opportunity for someone who looked like me to become the first African-American senator in Georgia. And then I saw on the screen flash that the Capitol was being raided, that there was an insurrection. And my first thought, and I don't know about you, was who could seize the Capitol? Where is security in this day and age? Who could take an entire building under siege? My second thought was that if there had been an angry mob or crowd or protesters of African-American descent, that we would see dead bodies laying in the wake. And I became angry, and I became frustrated. And then I remembered these words: we must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people, for many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And I thought about all of the great work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that day. And I thought to read more of some of his work. And I read this that I'll share. This will be the day when all of God's children will all be able to sing with new meaning, my country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, Black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. One day, if we come together, we may be free at last. I leave you with this before I bring the panel for our close. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And so, beloved community, love and stuff community, we have the work of love and the work of light to do. I'm so excited that you have shared with us in this almost 2 hours. And I just wanted to bring back a few of our panelists to join us before we close out. Valerie Colbert Osunwadi, Brenda Braceful, Darren Williams. It says Mahalia Jackson, but I know it's Pastor Valencia Edner, who did a fantastic job. I am just thankful for all of the orations, and of course, Aria Moody and Ursula Merritt and Richard Dickey Mason and all. But I wanted to bring the four of you back because your four faces are faces I think of in our Love and Stuff community as we continue to hold these conversations, because I believe tomorrow is the holy day, but the hallowed work begins after the holy day. And I think that we all have some individual responsibility to pay our rent of service. And I will be looking for you to help us share with those in the Love and Stuff community ways that we can pay our rent of service in the work, the hallowed work that is before us. So I just wanted to give each of you a chance to just have a final word to say. I'll start with Valerie Colbert Osunwadi. Thank you so much for just a final quick word. And then we'll go to Brenda, we'll go to Darren, Reverend Darren, and then Pastor Valencia.
A final quick word in memorializing this man's legacy. That's what you're asking?
Yes, ma'am.
I will continue to say, first of all, vote, because that's a continuous call to civic engagement and a continuous call to change and service. But I would, and again, my next would be to join some kind of community group that espouses or that continues Dr. King's work. And while I was reading, I was just struck about the new campaign on poverty that is emerging with Bishop, his name is escaping me now, in the South. Yes. And I know for a fact I'm going to be seeking out some group, because that touched my heart, some group that will allow me to serve somehow that community.
Thank you for that, Val. Brenda Braceful, thank you so much for being with us. I enjoy what I call consuming your mind. I love to consume you in Val's mind. And so thank you for your presence today. What words might you offer us about how we can memorialize his memory and pay our rent, which is that service is the rent that we should pay?
I think we should recognize, as Dr. King says, the time is always right to do what is right. And not only do we need to recognize the power to vote, we also need to recognize the power of contribution. If we don't do anything more than send $5 to a candidate, recognize that people in this day and age of politics, it takes money to run an election. Get involved, volunteer your time, hand out flyers, talk to people in your circle. And more importantly, if 10 people give $5 a piece, that may be enough for somebody to help air a commercial to get their name out there in the public. So get involved.
Okay, thank you for that, Brenda. Reverend Darren Williams, thank you I know that you put in the comments, there are 2 parts of the Birmingham letter that you neglected to mention. Please share that with us and then tell us what about the hallowed work moving forward? How do we memorialize the work after the holy day?
Oh, very good. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's always wonderful to remember what is worthy. And it is always great for those to have the mind to do it. So blessings to you, sir. 2 things I neglected to mention about the letter from the Birmingham jail. Dr. King did not have materials, paper particularly, to write on. He used the margins of the newspaper that the letter was printed to castigate him, and the empty spaces. And when he ran out of that, he used toilet paper and paper towel to pen the first part of these letters. The second thing is that the year later, 1964, when the Civil Rights Bill was drafted, his letter was used as the basis and the outline. And now imagine that. I'm going to let you deal with it on your own, that his letter was used by the Congress of the United States to do that. How we move forward. Let me share that in this post that I made about him on his birthday. A real, true, and great American was born 92 years ago today. And somehow he looked into the U.S. Constitution and mystically saw himself in it. He was born a reformer, as his name reveals. He grew up in a time that needed a voice because the wilderness of America was crying for one. He lived as a prophet and the moral conscience of a nation. He would cry loud and cause a reverberating echo that has and cannot yet be silenced until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. He died because he was right. And here it is right here. He died because he was right about those and that which was wrong. And he couldn't be quiet. He literally gave all he had for the cause of truth, justice, freedom, and love. For him, it all was one call, even though he knew it would cost him everything. I'm not convinced that we even understand him yet. 58 years after his death, in my estimation, he and Jesus Christ are the two most misunderstood people to walk across the breast of human history. Some people and their work we don't remember. Some people and their work we should never forget. Nationally, he will be commemorated, celebrated, and talked about this weekend and on Monday. Hollow and half-hearted salutation will be spoken in his honor, which is tragic because he may be the greatest single contributor to our struggle. The current social political climate in America again proves how sadly we failed by not listening and heeding his message. He sleeps now, but the applause of being hails the man who was more awake than we all. My suggestion to us in that, very simple. We've got to give it all. He sacrificed all. And if we believe in freedom for ourselves that way, we've got to sacrifice it all.
Thank you for that, Reverend Darren. I appreciate it, Darren Williams. Pastor Valencia, closing thought. And what do we do after the Holy Day tomorrow? What do we do as the hallowed work?
I'm in agreement that there are things we must do. But I think that our challenge that I think that Dr. King showed us at every turn was he challenged us to think beyond the surface, beyond what we saw just hovering over the surface. When he says things like the ultimate measurement of a man is not how he responds in times of comfort, but in times of difficulty. I think that's a challenge for us, even right now, how we will respond to the things that we see, that the measurement of who we are becomes more important than the accolades or the press of what we do, because often what we do is shrouded in our as the kids would say, in our fakeness, that we know it's what we're supposed to do, so therefore we do. I think Dr. King challenges us to get into that place that's not comfortable and to look at who we really are at our core and decide whether our measurement measures up to what it is that we say we must do. Because if we don't do the task, as you say, Reverend Darren, with some self-deprivation, if we don't do the things knowing that we have given of ourselves, then it's just an exercise in futility that looks good, but will not bring about any change. So if we really want change, we've got to do some measurement on the inside and not allow this time to just be something that's in the press, but allow this time to be a transformative time where we see that his words clearly, with a change of a Negro to an African American, with the change of a word here or there, sits clearly in the place in which we are 57 years after his death. It says something about what we have to do in order to move from where we were, because we're still there, to where we need to be. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Valerie Colbert Osumwadi, Brenda Braceful, Darren Williams, Valencia Edner, thank you all so much for joining us on this wonderful event. And those of you at home, thank you for watching. I appreciate it so much. We're going to close out with just a little "We Shall Overcome." And I hope that you will carry forward tomorrow in the holy day and the holiday commemorating this great man, that there is hallowed work to complete beyond that. Thank you for joining us.